The president tried again today to get out ahead of the outrage over the lapses that led or contributed to this this man getting on this plane and attempting to set off a bomb. Charles, how did the president do this time?
Well, this was an exercise in image repair. The president pretended that the reason he came out a day after his first address was because there was new information, and he cited the fact that the Nigerian attacker's father had appeared in the embassy. Of course, that was known already early in the weekend. And secondly, he said that whereas the information had left the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria and arrived in Washington, it hadn't been properly shared, but everybody knew that as well.
So why did he come out?
Because there's outrage here at the incompetence of this administration, the fact that his Secretary of Homeland Security, who's clearly over her head, had gone out on Sunday and pretended that the system had succeeded and then had to walk it back. And that when the president had come out himself after waiting 3 days, he appeared detached and cool, and he spoke about this as a criminal act, speaking about a suspect, speaking about an alleged attempt, speaking about it as an isolated extremist. In fact, we already knew about the connection in Yemen. This is an attempt by the administration, by the president himself, over and over again, to disconnect these kinds of attacks from the war on terror, which of course he declared over at his inauguration, and which unfortunately al-qaeda has not. And as a result of that, people ought to ask him, do you still believe he's like isolated extremist? People ought to ask him, and today he repeated the word extremist over and over again. What kind of extremist is he? Is he a jihadist? And lastly, people ought to ask him, are you still intent on releasing the 80 Yemenis in Guantanamo? Lieberman said Iraq is the war of yesterday, Afghanistan the war of today, and Yemen the war of tomorrow. It will be a lot easier to handle these 80 Yemenis in Guantanamo than in the wilds of Yemen, which is where they're going to end up if released, and plan more attacks on the United States.
Charles, you talked about Janet Napolitano, the Secretary of Homeland Security, former governor of Arizona, and you said you think she's over her head. It seems that this phrase that she used last week and in several appearances on Sunday shows where she said the system worked is now going to rival George W. Bush during Katrina saying you're doing a heck of a job, Ronnie. I mean, it is becoming part of the national conversation.
It's unfortunate, but whatever happens in her career, this will be how we remember her. The person who said 2 days after an attack that almost killed 300 Americans that the system had worked. She was a decent governor. She shouldn't be in this position. She has no experience, and her reaction was entirely inappropriate. But the president also, it's his reaction. The reason he showed up again today is because yesterday he just looks cool and detached and unconcerned. He shows up without a tie, and then he says in his statement, we will not rest until we find those involved. And then he hops into a golf cart and continues his games. This is serious stuff. You have to demonstrate seriousness. And the fact that he continually avoids speaking of the nature of the enemy, which is jihadism, is a sign of him not willing to acknowledge what every American understands is reality.